Hello everyone. Thanks for watching Edupedia World videos. I am Neeti Saxena and I am taking the subject Principles and Practices of Management. This particular video would be covering the human resource planning process, which comes under staffing, as we've already discussed in module 5 part 1, that human resource planning and personnel management are a part of staffing. So before actually starting human resource planning process, let's just first understand what is human resource planning or manpower planning. Basically, in an organization, um, the organization has a lot of different resources. The organization has money, which is the investment. It has machines, it has raw material, and also it has human resource. Now, human resource is a very important and integral part of the organization because any work that is being done in the office is by the people. So if your employees are nice, then automatically the productivity and efficiency of the organization would increase. These employees are the ones who bring in innovation and who do market survey and lot many things for the organization. So planning of the human resource becomes very important. When we say planning of human resource, what does it include? It includes everything which is related to joining or the recruitment till the time the employee gets separated from the organization. Not only from the point of recruitment, but prior to that also we do manpower planning, wherein we understand or we try to understand what is our current position, how many employees we have right now, in future how many employees would we be requiring, what are the different training needs for the employees, everything. So all these things are covered under manpower planning. Let me just read this bullet point for you. Human resource planning or manpower planning is the process by which a management determines how an organization should move from its current manpower position to its desired manpower position. So it also includes it ensures that an organization has the right kind of people in the right number at the right places in the right point of time. So right kind of people, whatever, for example, if you want marketing people, so maybe 3 years experience, 5 years, from which college do you need, or you need from particular company, you hire from that particular company. Then right number, do you need 10 employees, 15, 20, 100,000 employees, where these employees have to be placed. If you're hiring 5 people, are they being placed in the same department or in the same office, or maybe not in this office but the other office of the organization. So everything is planned, and this planning of human resource is called as manpower planning. I hope this is understood. Now let's move on to HR planning issues. What are the issues that the management or the HR management has to keep in mind while planning for the human resource? First question, how do we manage staffing in time of recession or expansion? See what happens when there is recession. If you have 100 employees and 100 employees are doing absolutely right work, but when the recession hits, the amount of work which the company has gets reduced. So when the work gets reduced, the number of employees becomes surplus. Now when the number of employees becomes surplus, in case if you ask the employees to leave, so it gives a bad name to the organization, that the organization landed up laying off employees or retrenching employees, which is bad. Expansion, in case if you're expanding, from where do you get employees? So all these things should be planned prior. That is called as forecasting. We'll be studying forecasting in detail in the coming slides. Forecasting basically means that the HR management, they sit and they look into it, or they forecast that what is going to happen in the future. Is the company going to expand? If yes, so then maybe if they think that another 3 years the company is going to expand, so before those 3 months or whatever the time is, they make sure that by that time they recruit that many employees which are required in the expansion, so that all of a sudden chaos doesn't happen and all the work is done with proper efficiency. So these are certain things which are to be decided under staffing. What impact does technology change, mergers or relocation have on staffing issues? In case if there is a technology change, of course, the kind of employees that you require needs to be changed, or maybe the employees that you have needs to be given certain training so that they know how to work on that technology. When mergers happen, then the culture of the organization changes. Two companies all of a sudden come together to work. So company A and company B, if the employees are tuned to the culture of company A, and B employees are tuned to the culture of company B. So when they start working together, there's a culture clash, there is an ego clash, there are a lot of changes that happen. So under human resource planning, you also think into it that how do these mergers, if in case if it happens, how do we overcome these challenges? In case if there is a relocation, how do you do it? So many things are related to staffing, and that is the reason these days human resource department has become very very important. Next question is, do we always have the right people in the right job at the right time? Very important. The company or the HR needs to ensure that at the right place, right kind of a person is recruited. For example, if a person has qualities of, he's a good salesman, and you pick him up, you recruit him, you select him, and you place him in a marketing profile. Now, this person will not be able to do really good in the marketing profile because he has those sales acumen. Similarly, a marketing person will not be able to do good justice to sales. So, when you are recruiting and selecting a person, the HR people have to ensure that the person selected is right and he has been placed at the right position at the right time. How do we get a human resource? Buy them or make them or both? For example, when I was talking about technological change, there are two options. Either you hire people who know that technology, or you train your current employees. So that is something which the HR has to decide depending upon keeping in mind the technology, the need of the organization, the expenditure which would be required to recruit or to give a training. So everything needs to be kept in mind, and then a final decision is taken. Major objectives of HRP: preventing understaffing and overstaffing. The right number of people should be there in the organization. It should not happen that the company has more employees, because then it's cost to the company. Less employees, the work would be chaotic, and the profitability or the efficiency would go down. Ensure the organization has the right employees with the right skill at the right place at the right time. This is a point that we've covered already. Ensure the organization is responsive to changes in its environment, which is very, very important. In case if the organization is not ready to change with the environment, the organization might get redundant, which is bad. So it is very, very important that the organization is responsive to change to its environment. Provide direction and coherence to all HR activities and systems. Now, if we talk about uses of HR planning, it helps in recruitment selection, it helps in training and development, it helps in retraining and redeployment, it helps in productivity plan, retention plan, redundancy plan, succession plan. Out of these, the four points we've already covered. Retention, of course, it is the HR management and the HR department which retains the employees, which makes sure that your good employee stays with your organization for the longer period of time, maybe by giving them incentives, maybe by giving them training, maybe by giving them recognition, maybe by giving them career opportunities, and so on. Redundancy plan, of course, this is something that we've covered. Redundant. The company and the employee should not get redundant. That is something that the HR looks into. Succession plan. For example, if your head HR is leaving, so prior only, maybe 2 months prior, the company will make sure that the junior level employee who was, let's say, if the VP HR is leaving, so maybe the AVP, he is trained to take the VP position. That is called a succession. In case if an employee leaves, then the employee who is working under that particular employee is trained so much that when the higher position employee is leaving, the lower position employee can take over easily. So that is called a succession plan. All these things are covered and done by the HR department, and that is the reason these days HR department is not called just HR, it is called a strategic HR, because all these things are related to the strategy of the organization. Now this is very important, and this is basically the main thing that we have to cover in this video. It is the HRP process. Means that before developing the HR plan, it is very, very important to understand the organization objective and plans for the coming time. That means it is very important for the HR to understand the vision and the mission of the company, whether it is short, medium, and long term. Everything what the company wants to do should be very, very clearly understood by the HR head. Keeping that in mind, the HR needs to do two major things: HR demand forecasting and HR supply forecasting. HR demand forecasting is keeping the vision and mission of the company in mind. The HR needs to analyze that what is the number, category, and skill and experience that would be required by the organization in the coming future. That means how many employees would be required by the organization in the coming future, what category of employees would be required, what are the skills and experience which would be required by these employees. So this HR demand forecasting is very, very important. Second is, in case if they understand that, okay, this is the number of employees, this is the category of employees that we require, from where are we going to hire these employees? Are we going to hire it from a recruitment agency, or are we going to hire it from the campus or from some other company, or are we going to do some headhunting? What are we going to do? So this HR demand and HR supply forecasting is something that needs to be understood so that in the future the company doesn't face a problem. Based on the HR demand forecasting report and HR supply forecasting report, HR planning and programming is done. That means the HR plans that, okay, at current position we have this number of employees. Maybe there are surplus in the head office, there are not so many employees in the branch office, so maybe then they think of relocating certain employees from the head office to the branch office. Maybe today they have 10 employees, they would be requiring another 10, so then they need to identify what kind of these 10 people are required, at what position they are required, what kind of skills and experience do these people need, and from where are we going to hire these employees. Based on that, the HR planning and programming is done. Also, it is required to be understood that it doesn't even only mean hiring and recruiting employees. It also means that in case if there are surplus employees, then what needs to be done? In case if there is training required, what needs to be done? So all this HR planning is done based on the understanding of the vision and mission of the organization, based on the understanding of what is the demand of the organization. So once the planning and programming is done, then it is implemented, and a control, monitoring, evaluation is done every now and then to ensure that whatever the HR plan has been made is being implemented. And once it is implemented, what were the results? Was it right or was it wrong? Whatever forecasting was done by the HR, was it correct or was it incorrect? If it was correct, well and good. If something went wrong, then it is analyzed that why did it go wrong, and again new HR plan is made and it is implemented. While monitoring, controlling and evaluation, there are two things which are always kept in mind, that in case if there are surplus employees, then what do you need to do? In case there is shortage of employees, then what you need to do? In case if there is shortage, you need to of course recruit and select employees. In case there are surplus, then maybe you would, first of all, that you need to do is you will restrict hiring. You will make sure that no more number of employees are taken in the organization. Restricted hours, maybe you can take employees only for some particular period of time, maybe contractual employees, or maybe existing employees you would ask them to come only for few hours and not for the entire day. VRS is voluntary retirement scheme. That means you ask the employees to take a voluntary retirement. Even if they are not of that particular age, you would ask them to take a voluntary retirement, and you would give them all those benefits which they were supposed to get once they retire. So even if the retirement age is, let's say, 60, and the person would be getting gratuity, pension, PF, and many more emoluments at the time of retirement at the age of 60. When you have surplus employees, you can ask an employee of maybe at the age of 50 that, okay, there are 10 years more left for your service, but we do not require your service anymore. So you take a VRS and we will give you all those benefits which you were supposed to get at the age of 60. That is called as VRS. Layoff is a negative term. It is not considered good laying of employees, but at times the organization land up laying. As if you must have seen when the big recession hit the entire world, then there were many companies who were throwing out employees, who were asking their employees to leave. Why? Because they did not have work. There was surplus of employees. So then you would have to ask the employees to leave the organization, which is not considered good. And of course, if there is shortage of employees, you need to recruit and select employees and place them at the required position. So this is the HRP process. If we go through these slides, you will see that it is the same thing that I had explained in the previous slide, but we will go through these slides so that you will be able to understand it better. It involves forecasting personnel needs, assessing personnel supply, and matching demand supply factors through personnel related program. That is what I told you. If you can see the two boxes, blue box HR demand forecast and supply forecast, there is a balance which is to be being maintained between the both. And keeping in mind the reports of HR demand forecasting and supply forecasting, the HR planning and programming is done. So organization objective and policies are something that is to be kept in mind. HR demand forecast is the process of estimating the future quantity and quality of people required. For example, in a manufacturing firm, A production plan determines the number and types of products to be produced in each period. From this information, number of working hours by each skilled personnel can be calculated. Once the hours are available, the quality and quantity of personnel required can be forecasted. There are many more forecasting techniques apart from the example that has been given. Those forecasting techniques are something that we will learn in the coming slides. See, as I told you, these are the different forecasting techniques based through which the HR department can make out that what would be the HR demand in the future. Let me just explain you these five techniques one by one. Managerial judgment. The managers, they sit together, they discuss and arrive at a figure which would be future demand for the labor, which is very, very simple. Keeping in mind that what kind of projects the company would be taking up in the future, keeping in mind the vision and mission of the organization, the top management decide that what kind of employees and what number of employees would be required in the future. Second is ratio trend analysis. This technique involves studying past ratios, like between the number of workers and sales in an organization, and forecasting future ratios. So what is basically done is that in the past, what kind of number of people were required to do, let's say, I'll give you an example, maybe 100 units of work was required. For 100 units of work, you would require 10 people. So now if it is to be increased to 1000 units, how many more people would you require? So automatically the company, 90 more people would be required to make it 200. So that is how, depending upon what kind of people, what number of people were required in the past, you can anticipate that what the kind of people would you be requiring in the future. That is called as ratio trend analysis. Third is work study techniques. Work study technique can be used when it is possible to apply work measurement to calculate the length of operations and the amount of labor required. That means when some proper study is being done to analyze that what is the length of every work and how many people would be required to finish that particular work. So then depending upon that, you know how many employees you would be requiring. Delphi technique is basically you take suggestions from experts. That let's say if you are starting with a new company, absolutely new, it's a startup, you do not know how many employees you would be requiring. So what you can do is you can go to an expert, or you can ask 4-5 experts to give you suggestion as in how many people would be required in your organization. This is called as a Delphi technique, wherein you take suggestion from the experts. Then comes flow models. This is the simplest one is, the simplest flow model is Markov model, which determines the time that should be covered. It establishes categories also called states to which employees can be assigned. So what actually is being done, that the entire work is analyzed, that how much time would be required to do that particular work, and establish categories also called states to which employees can be assigned. So in every category of work, there are some people who are assigned categories which are called as states. Now every state is then analyzed, that what is the annual moment, that means how many employees joined in that particular state and how many employees left in a specific period of time. Keeping this information in mind, it is anticipated that in the future how many employees would be required for that particular category or state. It is also looked into that what is the probability of transition of employees from one state to the other. So for example, if there is a managerial category and there is an executive category, so what is the probability that the employees can be shifted or promoted from the executive category to the managerial category, and so on. So this flow model is actually analyzed, the entire organization is analyzed, that what is the flow of employees at different levels, how many are promoted, how many leave the organization, how many are recruited in a particular period of time, and keeping this information in mind, the forecasting is done. So let me just wrap up the HR demand forecasting. The major techniques are management judgment, ratio trend analysis, flow models, Delphi technique, work study techniques, and others. Basically, the survey method can be used, or maybe the employees can be involved in the decision making. So that is something which is done, which is not of much of use. Majorly, ratio trend analysis is the one which is generally used in the organizations. In case if the organization does not have much of time, so then the management judgment or Delphi technique is used, wherein the people, they sit together and then they brainstorm and they come to a conclusion. So going back to the HRP process model, we have covered the first thing, organization objective and plan, that is to understand it, understand the vision and mission of the organization. Post that, we have discussed what is HR demand forecasting and what are the techniques of these HR demand forecast. Now we would be studying what is HR supply forecast and what are the techniques of this supply forecasting. Now, HR supply forecast. After determining the demand forecast, supply forecasting is to be done to determine the procedure and sources that how these requirements can be met. That is, the number of people likely to be available from within and outside the organization after considering the facts like number of absenteeism, promotions, transfers, etc. So what is actually done is that once the HR people and the top management, they understand that this is the demand that we would be requiring in the future for the employees, then a forecasting is done that from where are we going to fulfill this demand. That means from where are we going to recruit these people. Uh, Also, it is kept in mind that either these people or these employees can be recruited internally or externally. When we say internal source, then it says from within the organization, like promotion, transfer, and references. Promotion and transfer is something which is very common, and I'm sure you must be aware of these terms. References is basically that referral system is done. References is taken from the employees, and through the references that you generate, you ask these people to come for an interview, and in case if they're selected, they are placed in the organization. External sources could be campus consultants. Campus is basically the college campuses. Consultants, competitors, unsolicited applications, like in case if you're getting those applications on the Dropbox of your organization, so from that you can pick up the employees. So this HR supply forecast has to meet the demand forecast. And that is what is very, very important, so that in the coming times when you need some particular type of employee, your database is already ready, that from where you have to pick up these employees. Supply forecasting, as I have already mentioned, existing source of employees, internal source of employees, and external source of employee. Existing human resource is skill inventories and management inventories. Whatever the number of employees that you have right now, what kind of skill they have, what kind of skill the management has. So keeping this in mind, it is anticipated that in case in future, if some additional skill is required by the organization, then can the current employees be trained, or is it necessary that you need to hire employees from outside? Internal source of supply, we'll just cover these one by one when we talk about see, existing human resource, which we've just covered. Analysis of present employees done by HR audits, the audit of non-managers and also of the management. The skill inventories and management inventories are kept in mind. Then internal source of supply, as I had mentioned in this particular slide, inflows and outflows. So all these points, the 5 points, we'll cover in detail. Internal source of supply, how do you anticipate that how do you analyze that what is the internal source of supply? The techniques are inflows and outflows. Sources of inflows are transfers and promotions, and the sources of outflows are resignation, discharge, demotion, retirement, and promotion. So keeping this in mind, that how many people were transferred, how many were promoted, how many left the organization, how many were taken into the organization. So this is the inflow and outflow. So keeping this in mind, the supply forecast can be anticipated. Turnover rate is something that how many employees are leaving the organization in a particular period of time. So it is calculated by number of separations during 1 year upon average number of employees during the year into 100. So the turnover rate gives you a number of figure which tells you that how many number of employees left the organization in the past year. So approximately the same number of employees might leave the next year. So that helps you in deciding that how many number of employees would you be requiring, and can they be internally supplied or not. Conditions of work and absenteeism, productivity level, movement among jobs is that some jobs are sources of personnel for other jobs in ways of promotions and upward movements. So whatever the movement of jobs happen within the organization, upward, lateral transfers, all these things are kept in mind to understand that whether the employees can be supplied internally or not. In case if there is a vacancy, can that vacancy be filled by the internal supply of employees? In case if it cannot be done, then you look for external supply. And external supply is your recruitment agencies, campus placements, competitors. Let me just take you back to the slide where I had mentioned all these. Existing source of employee, internal and external source. So I hope this is clear to you that supply forecast includes three things: existing, internal, external. In existing, You just look into the what kind of inventories you have as of now. Internal source of supply, you look into it, that what is the internal flow, transfers, promotions, turnover rate, absenteeism, the productivity level, all of this. And then you look into the external supply, that will you be able to get it from your recruitment agency or from your campus placement or from the competitors. So, and why is external supply important? See, in an organization, if you only recruit internally, then what happens is that the idea generation becomes very less. Why? Because these employees are just bounded to your organization, and they do not have that much of exposure or to the external environment. So for that, external supply is important because it includes, or it gives an opportunity for the organization to recruit new blood and new experience. Organizational personnel need, growth and diversification is something which is being met by external supply. So external recruitment is also very, very important. It is not mandatory that you are always looking for recruitment internally. So let me just take you back again to the flow chart. Here it is. Now we have understood HR demand forecast, HR supply forecast. Once both of these things are with us, then what do we need to do? HR plan and program. So now, till now, forecasting techniques we are clear that what are the forecasting techniques used for the HR demand forecasting and what are the forecasting techniques which are being used for the HR supply forecast. Now we will understand what is HR plan and program. Okay. HR programming. It is the functioning part of the combination of both HR demand forecast and HR supply forecast. So HR programming is HR demand plus HR supply. So what are you doing now? You are balancing the HR demand and supply. If you think that there are 100 of employees which you would be requiring in the coming future, then from where are you getting these 100 employees? So that balance is maintained. In future, if you need 100 people, you have the database for 100 people. So now that we have understood what is HR programming, let me take you to that particular slide which was related to the process of HR planning. So when we talk about the HR planning process, the first thing is that the HR head needs to understand what is the vision and mission of the organization. After understanding the vision and mission, the HR head needs to do HR demand forecasting and HR supply forecasting. Based on the reports of HR demand and HR supply forecast, HR planning and programming is done, which ensures that in the coming future, whatever the demand of the organization is related to the human resource, the HR department would be able to fulfill those requirements. And then comes the next step, which is HR implementation. HRP implementation is basically implementing the plan which has been made during the HR programming. So HR plan implementation is converting an HR plan into action, which includes recruitment, selection, placement, training and development, retraining, retention plan, succession plan, control and evaluation. Control and evaluation is the last step of the HR planning process. It includes keeping the budgets, targets, and standards in mind. Uh, every organization, when is making the strategy of the organization, every organization keeps in mind that the what is the budget, how much can they spend on the employee salary, how much can they spend on the employee training, how much can they spend on employees recreation facilities. So all those things needs to be kept in mind while the HR planning is done. During the control and evaluation, it is checked that whatever HR plan was made, is it being implemented in the right manner? If it is implemented in the right manner, then by the end of the implementation, when the HR plan is being evaluated, then it is evaluated that were there any lacunas left? Did the organization suffer at any cost for the on the cost of the human resource? If yes, then a replanning is done so that in the future the HR planning is done in the best possible manner. This particular slide tells you that in case if there is shortage of employees or if there is surplus of employees in an organization, then what the HR department does. In case if there is shortage of employees, then the management will definitely look into that proper recruitment is done, more employees are hired. They might even offer incentives for postponing retirement. That is, they might even ask the employees that in case if you postpone your retirement, then you would be getting some extra compensation. The retired employees can also be rehired and they can be recruited again as part-time employees. Attempts are made to reduce turnover. Turnover is the number of employees leaving the organization in a particular period of time. So, of course, the organization ensures that the turnover rate reduces and the retention rate increases. Work present staff overtime, that whatever staff is present in the organization, the HR head and the HR team can ask these people to work for overtime and extra incentives can be given to them. Next point is subcontract work to another firm. That is, at times what happens is that in case if you have less number of employees, then you might even outsource the work of the organization. You might give that work to another organization. Hire temporary employees, re-engineer to reduce needs. Re-engineering is basically a process in which the job related to every position is restructured. So that means that in case if there are 5 positions in the hierarchy, so uh, the job is restructured in such a way that maximum potential of the employees can be used in minimum period of time so that overall productivity of the organization increases. Outsource an entire function. This is something that we've already covered. Use technology to improve productivity, which is self-understood that in case if the productivity of the organization is not that much and that you need surplus employees, so you might even replace employees with some machinery and some better technology, which increases the productivity of the organization. Now, on the other hand, it can also happen that you have surplus number of employees. In case if the company has surplus number of employees, then that means the company is spending a lot of money. Rather, we can say that uh, there is wastage of resources. More compensation is being given to the employees, which is not required. So, in that case, do not replace employees who leave. In case of an employee is leaving, so the work of that employee can be divided into that particular work can be given to the other employees who are already existing in the organization. Offer incentives for early retirement. This is something which is related to VRS, which is voluntary retirement scheme. In this particular scheme, the organization asks certain people to retire even if they are not attained the retirement age. For example, let's say in an organization, the retirement age is 60 and a person is working at the age of 50. The organization can ask this person to leave, but at the same time, the organization ensures that whatever benefits were supposed to be given when he retired would be given at the age of 50. Like for example, if there is a pension scheme, provident fund, gratuity which is to be given at the age of 60, the company will say that even if you retire at the age of 50, we would give you those benefits. So in that case, even the employee is at the benefit and the organization is also at the benefit end. So this is something which is done by the organization. Transfer or reassign excess employees. Use slack time for employee training or equipment maintenance, so that at the same time, in case if you have surplus employees, you can train them, keeping in mind that what particular projects the organization would be picking up in the future. Reduce work hours, lay off employees. Lay off employees, basically, there are certain organizations who lay off employees, but this is not considered good. And that is the reason HR department usually does not adopt this practice, because if you're laying off employees, then the name of the organization in the market goes bad. So that is the reason layoff is not usually done. But at the time of recession, you must have seen that there were many companies, they had to actually lay off employees, but it is always considered as a negative technique of reducing number of employees in the organization. And of course, you can freeze the hiring, that is, you do not hire more people. With this, we come to the end of this particular video. Thank you so much for watching this video. I would suggest you that to do watch the next part, which is part 3 of module 5, because that would be covering job analysis, recruitment and selection. Thank you so much.